Hi friends! In this watercolor tutorial we are going to learn how to paint snapdragons. They are beautiful and colorful flowers you find in nature. Are you ready? Let's start together. In this watercolor tutorial we are going to learn how to create some snapdragons. Beautiful flowers that are of different colors. We're gonna just use our color palette and you can follow the colors I'm going to use, or you can decide to use any other color that you have available. I'm going to use a Princeton brush size 12. This is from the Heritage series, my cups of water and my colors that are Winsor & Newton. The paper I'm using is Archie's paper. I'm gonna start by wetting my brush, and then the idea is that to create these snapdragons we are going to use mainly the belly of our brush, round brush, to create the shape of these flowers. I'm going to start by creating these flowers in red color. This is Scarlet Lake, and I'm going to start by pressing using the tip of my brush, and then pressing using the belly, and then releasing the pressure. And I'm going to do this to create this abstract watercolor snapdragon. I'm going to use the same idea to create lower flowers. I'm going to remove pigment in my cup of water, so I'm going to have a lighter value of, in this case, red, and I will add a bit of orange to change the hue of this flower. And I'm going to use the belly of my brush to create the round shape that is typical of these snapdragons. I'm going to leave a center part empty because I'm going to use green, sub-green, to create the stem of these flowers afterwards. So I'm gonna focus for now onto creating these flowers, the main part of the flower that has these round shapes that I can create with the belly of my brush. And in this case I will have this composition going from this corner up to this corner, so I keep that in mind because I want to know where the flower is going to be pointed to. I've added a bit of opera rose. I'm going to work on this upper part of the flower with my red Scarlet Lake color. I'm going to change the value. And the idea that I want to work with is that we're going to create different branches, sort of a different snapdragons close to each other that are pointing towards the corner here on the left, the upper corner of the paper. I added a bit of yellow ochre, and I like how the contrast of and how the bleeding of yellow ochre into red is happening. I can add, because the red is still wet, I can add a bit of yellow ochre even in the lower part of this snapdragon. Always use orange and red colors, let's say, for all of these flowers, but I will remember to change a bit the hue and slightly the values in order to have a well-defined composition. So I take this red that I have left on the palette, I add a bit of orange and a bit of yellow ochre. Now we'll start to create another Snapdragon here, close to this first one. And it will always point to the upper left corner of this paper. I will add a bit of red onto this yellow ochre. I love the bleeding. And I change the value by removing pigment, adding water. This Snapdragon is a bit shorter compared to the first one. I will add a bit of blue to make this red even darker and change a bit the hue. And I'm happy with it. I'm going to create another Snapdragon, going this way in the middle between the two. And I want this one to be a bit more yellow. So I will use my yellow lemon dip. I will add a bit of orange and a bit of red that I already have ready. It's a beautiful color, more towards the orange. I add a bit more yellow. This is a loose style watercolor composition of Snapdragon. I always like to paint loose style florals because it's up to the artist to interpret how to make these flowers, and there is no right, there is no wrong. I add a bit of red in the lower part, and this Snapdragon is slightly wet, so there is a bit of bleeding that is happening. And then I just add a bit of water from the lower part. I'm going to add another yellow Snapdragon here. This is much brighter. You can add a bit of yellow ochre. As you can see, I'm always using the belly of my round brush and the tip of the brush. In order to create the shapes of these flowers. So the belly, and then I drag until the tip of the flower of the brush is used. So I use the belly, and then I drag until the tip is used. Belly until the tip is used. And then just with very little amount of pigment and more water, I'm going just to drag down the color to make this Snapdragon even longer. We can add another Snapdragon here, maybe going more towards this direction, the upper right corner. in order to change. I add a bit of red. And basically, as I have already said, I use the tip, I press, I use the belly, and then I release. The tip, the belly, and then I release. Doesn't have to be too precise. Try to have fun, use the colors that you have at your disposal. Just remember to change values and colors in order to make this composition more appealing to the eye. Let's say not too boring. At this point, we can use the sap green and maybe a thinner brush. I will use this round 6 from Princeton Heritage to create the stems of these flowers. The stems of Snapdragons are just visible in the middle part. So I drag it from the center of the Snapdragon I've created, and they go left and right. I start from the center and I drag this stem down towards the center, and then we have other parts that are going left and right. Where the pigment is still wet, there is going to be some wet in wet, but where the pigment is dry, the green will not blend. And then I think at this point we can add a few Snapdragon that are more in the back, therefore they're not going to be this saturated with color. That means we're going to have less pigment on our brush and more water. So for example, I can create one in the back that is a bit on the red side, red color with a bit of this yellow ochre. I have my round brush that is full of pigment, so I dab it into water. I remove part of the pigment, and using the water that I have left, I start to create one in the back. I use the same technique, then I dab into water, I remove pigment, and I have lighter version of this red, and will give the impression that these Snapdragons are in the back because they are lighter. in color. And then while this red is still wet, I can add, for example, some darker pigment, just to have some bleeding moments here and there. Still, this Snapdragon is lighter than all the other ones because it's in the back. I'm going to do a similar one that is more going towards the upper right corner, this time maybe in yellow color, and always being in the back. We're going to do this flower with a much less saturated color, therefore we're going to dab the brush into water in order to have less pigment on our brush. And then I'm going to use always the same technique. And then with some yellow lemon dip, I want to give some accent colors here and there. So I just add a few strokes. And while these Snapdragons in the back are still wet, I'm going to use my finer brush, the round 6 from Princeton, a bit of soft green, and I'm going to add the stem in the center. Some bleeding will happen where the green meets the red in this flower where it's still wet, and the same will happen with the yellow where the yellow is still wet. I'd like to add a last one that is still in the color of the yellow and more in the back, that is going to go towards the lower left corner of this paper. Is in the back, so it's less saturated. We're going to create our yellow and dab into water in order to remove part of the pigment, and I'm going to create it here. It will give a bit of movement. Having the Snapdragon lighter here, go in this direction. Still in the back, so it's much lighter. And if you want, you can add a few strokes with a much concentrated yellow. For example, this is yellow lemon dip, and this it will blend. This will blend because the lighter yellow is still wet onto our paper. While this yellow is still wet, I'd like to add the stem of this yellow Snapdragon. So I use my finer Princeton brush. If you don't like this wetting wet and bleeding effect happening, you just wait for your Snapdragon to dry completely, and then you can add the yellow, the green stem in the center part. It's up to you. I personally love this bleeding effect, therefore I want to do it now, as soon as possible. We can add the stem of this pink in the back here, going down here. I hope you enjoyed painting Snapdragons with me. As you can see, it's not that difficult to paint Snapdragons, but it takes a bit of practice. Let me know in the comments below if you would like to see more videos like this one, and I will work hard to make it happen. Also, if you would like to follow my journey and come along with me, subscribe to this channel. It would really mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. See you next time.